Greetings and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tonight, I have the honor and privilege of being joined by my great friend and brother and Murshid, Sheikh Wahid Azal of the Fatimiyya Sufi order. Tonight, in the series of dialogues that we are having with Sheikh Wahid Azal, this is going to be part 8 of our series of conversations. And this part 8 is basically a continuation of the original part 5 that we did, which covers Dugin and the Agents of Chaos. So I will put the part 5 link below, so make sure you watch that first before you hear this dialogue. And it's important because we're in this pivotal time when there's so much chaos and division, and there are people just attacking each other in the spiritual warfare that goes on. So this is the reason why Sheikh Wahid Azal wants to expand on the part 5 conversation of the Agents of Chaos and the Dugin Network in our part 8 tonight. And it's important we cover these dialogues, we cover what's happening, and it's important to see where is our world really heading in the next few years, and what can we really do about it. If we just sit down and be stagnant, that's when these enemies get emboldened. And this is what motivated us to have this dialogue tonight. So without further ado, Nur alaikum to Sheikh Wahid Azal, and we begin this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, God, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful.
Alaykum Nur, and also from my end, in the name of God, the Most Revocatively Alive, the Supreme Discloser. Bismillah al-Ajla al-Ahya al-Ajla. I'm sorry I'm not with my camera tonight. As I was mentioning to Salman before we went on air, I upgraded to Windows 11, which was a big mistake, and I actually encourage people not to do that. When all the glitches hit the new operating system, you find out very quickly that even though Microsoft has released their beta version of Windows 11, most laptop computers, most manufacturers don't have the updated drivers for the Windows 11. So that won't probably be up and running until for another year. So as much as Microsoft is pushing people to upgrade to Windows 11, don't do it if you can help it. Otherwise, you'll meet the same problem that I had, that none of your drivers, your audio drivers, your video drivers, none of them will work properly. So right now, I'm starting to slowly get the laptop I go online with back to its operating condition. Anyway, to get to the topic at hand, this Dugin network, which is not what a lot of people think it is a very interesting crew of individuals. It has taken on a life of its own, even beyond, I would say, the Russians and Aleksandr Dugin himself. What Aleksandr Dugin has unleashed throughout Eastern Europe and also in North America is really its own egregore, for lack of a better way of putting it. The egregore is a concept that you find in the Western occult. It's an entity that is basically conjured, that takes on a life of its own, has a collective reality. It is like a dark collective unconscious. This is a concept that the occult revival back in the 19th century coined about these sorts of realities. So the Duginist egregore is very much alive and well, and recently has come back to my doorstep. And I find it very interesting that it has come back to my doorstep at exactly the same time where Trump and these Trumpists in the United States are beginning to reassert themselves again, very aggressively. No thanks to the wimpishness and the complete spinelessness of the liberals and Democrats, which I think due to their spinelessness and Biden's and that whole neoliberal faction of the Democratic Party, that they are basically ensuring that Donald Trump and that crew of fascists will come back in 2024 and probably worse than ever. But here we are, and these people are now revisiting and come back to my doorstep in a very interesting but somewhat expected way. I found out about a week ago that there's a gentleman, a Polish gentleman with a very strange name, Paul Sejul. He's a Polish fellow who is claiming to be a Bayani, but he is also a fundamentalist Catholic, while also simultaneously a kind of a Noahide Torah thumper, if you would. And these sorts of weird identities and contradictory identities in the realm of ideology and identity are a very regular feature of the way that the Duginists roll online. And you find this particularly with this crowd from Eastern Europe and in Poland, especially, that has a far-right nationalist government in power at the moment, especially on its parliamentary level. And all of a sudden, this guy comes out on Reddit and starts to have, invite this nemesis of mine and other of the brethren of the Fatimiyya and the Bayani community by the name of Dale Husband. This guy has gone out of his way to defame me all over the internet. He has defamed the Bayani community. He has defamed my friends. Initially, he was, spouting the party line of the Duginists and the Baha'is, that, I'm some kind of a nut and a lone wolf. And then quickly, after a lot of people came out to my defense, they changed their line, and now they're calling me a cult leader, and I've, bamboozled people and put wool over people's eyes, and I'm telling people what to do, and all this, the typical kind of nonsense, the kind of stuff that they themselves do. Now, the history with this Dale Husband is very interesting. To cut to the chase, Dale Husband represents a fake opposition that the Baha'is have created against themselves as a means of gatekeeping the opposition. When I figured this out back in 2018, quickly, and I spoke it, this guy and the people around him became extremely aggressive. So then they began to ostracize me out of the circles in Reddit, etc., and even tried to push me out of Reddit altogether, all because I pointed out the fact that, the talking points that they were pushing were inconsistent with what they were professing to being. And, for people who have experience of the internet, this is all business as usual, but this is also a modus operandi that the Dugin people, or this Duginist egregore, is very adept at, in infiltrating oppositions and even, all kinds of different groups as the tactic of basically making any opposition or any kind of a movement ineffective, or basically pushing it into a completely different stream. They did this in the United States. Arguably, this is what the Dugin networks did to the Republican Party, where today the Republican Party of today resembles nothing of any of its so-called professed Randian libertarian values of a few years ago, and now is effectively a far-right authoritarian fascist party, for lack of a better way of doing it. So anyway, this guy, this Polish guy, shows up, claims the Bayani identity, and then starts to have a go at me, and then inviting all these people into his list on Facebook. I was given the heads up by a couple of people on Reddit about this guy, so I, basically put a post up on one of my own groups on Reddit, and then went to see what was going on this Facebook list, and all I see is this guy is having a psychotic episode where he's posting one post after another defaming me. And in particular, he is using this particular docs blog that the Duginists made about me back in late 2016. You've seen it as well, the revolutionary, the fourth revolutionary blog post, where they're using this guy is using this as evidence of some kind, whatever he's claiming about me. That's very interesting. One of our friends, our mutual friends, said this to this guy, that when he's using that docs blog made by these Duginist fascists, that the ideas of a fascist cult do not assert or prove the cultism that he's trying to accuse me of. It actually asserts and establishes the very accusation that I'm trying to make about this fella. But what is interesting is that this individual, who's a complete right-wing lunatic, number one, he's claiming to be the Messiah of Judaism, number one. Number two, he is befriending this individual, Dale Husband, who we caught, incidentally, in 2020, last year, having some extremely troubling public views where he was, in fact, endorsing and advocating for pedophilia, right? So an individual who is trying to, assert their righteousness against me as the bad guy is befriending an extremely dubious and troubling figure who is both a fake opposition and as well as has these ideas about, pedo normalization, which in any civilized society is a crime. It's basically a criminal is basically criminal, especially because he was asserting in a few of these posts on his former blog that he was, courting young prepubescent girls across state lines. Now, another one of our mutual friends happens to believe that the kind of persona and the kind of activities that this Dale husband is pursuing online is a did giveaway that he is working as an insider for the police. That when police are trying to do sting operations and whatnot, that the first thing they go, especially when they're dealing with pedophiles, is that they recruit other pedophiles. And that, this individual who has had extensive experience with the way that police recruit individuals from the criminal world, that it looks very suspicious to him that given the kind of information that was disclosed to law enforcement in the state of Texas about this individual's public online activities, that not only was he not arrested for this kind of activity, but that he has been going on and has been emboldened ever since. So this tells us a lot of things about the scenarios that we're dealing online on the internet, where you have bona fide criminals being deputized as attack dogs for certain corporate agendas. And then once, they either hit a brick wall or whatnot, then other forms of fascist criminals are called in to help these individuals in the public domain against their purported enemies. Now, I'm a longstanding enemy of the Duginist fascists. I'm a longstanding enemy of the Baha'is. Both of them, as we've established before, are what we have labeled righteously, in my opinion, the cultists of the Edomite cultists.
Yes.
So the question is, why now? Why all of a sudden are these people coming out of the woodwork after such a period of hiatus where where nothing was going on? We were all, doing our own thing. And the only logical answer to that is that because of the work that you and I have been doing, the fact that you have formally come into the Fatimiyya, the fact that other people have come into the Fatimiyya, the fact that, we are a kind of a brotherhood that is growing. And this worries certain powers that be. It definitely worries the hyphen Baha'is. It definitely worries, these Duginist cultists and the Duginist egregore. Why? Because throughout 2016 and beyond it, they were asserting, like I said before, that I was a one-man show, a lone wolf, trying to basically craft a persona, identity of me, of some crazy person to eventually get me in trouble with the law. These were the same people that right after my wife passed away under suspicious circumstances, put their foot to the pedal of massive attacks against me all over the internet as a means of trying to get authorities involved in taking my daughter away from me. Luckily, it never got anywhere. And then on the recommendation and advice of the German federal police, we left Germany and came to Australia, but these attacks continued until two of the individuals who had been the face of the attacks, I neutralized permanently after it was shown to them that this Mr. Dale husband is an active online pedophile. But now all of a sudden, since that time when everything went quiet, all of a sudden these attacks are stepping up again. And it's some very dubious actors, fascists, far-righters, people that are genuinely under any analysis or under any diagnostic would be labeled as mentally ill and criminally insane, like this Polish fellow, are jumping into the fray and are responsible for these sorts of attacks. So, what I wanted to talk about more is that this form of attack is orchestrated, and other people have experienced it as well. A lot of people I know in independent settings were experiencing it during the election of 2016. You witnessed it yourself during that period in the lead up to the Trump election, and then in other escalated forms after the election of Donald Trump. So, the question is, what is happening? And what is happening is that, we have these periodic episodes when there is a certain political wheel in motion where not only are the actors involved in a particular political game, targets of one or either party, but not even supporters of one or either side are being targeted. But oftentimes these corporate trolls or their interests will come out and attack some of the old people that they had been attacking at a certain time, especially if these people have not gone away. So the whole point of the exercise here is about political supremacy. And if there's an enemy that has not been taken down by these corporate trolls, then periodically these trolls will come out, given at certain political events that are going on at the world at large, and start to attack these people. So what have we had happen? In the last week in the United States, we have had this tug of war between Trump and his lawyers and the federal judge about the release of these files related to the January 6th insurrection. Unfortunately, today, Donald Trump got a stay from the court. So Donald Trump doesn't have to fork over these documents from the White House from the National Archives over to the special committee in the US Congress. But we've also had Steve Bannon being indicted by Congress. So all of his Trumpist nonsense is now back in the news again. And it is within this particular week that these attacks against me started. Now, I'm not a member of the Democratic Party. I don't like the Democratic Party. I'm not a liberal. I am very much open about the fact that I'm an eco-Marxist. And I look at the system of liberal democracy in the West as a kind of an evolved form of techno-authoritarianism. There's nothing remotely democratic about the system that we're living under at all. So I don't understand why I'm being lumped into the enemy camp by these Duginists who very well know that I am not in any way, shape, or form friend of neoliberalism. But there's other things going on, and that is because of the nexus of Aleksandr Dugin with Zionism and the Baha'is with Zionism, right? You oftentimes find these various actors contracting for each other, right? So, initially, one of the issues that I had with Dugin and his people as I got to know them better in 2014 and 2015 is that despite their pretensions to support the Lebanese resistance and Iran and whatnot, that Aleksandr Dugin and his people are very much supporters of Zionism. And there's a history of this going back to Dugin himself in the period just after the fall of the Soviet Union and even before, where he had maintained a friendship with an individual by the name of Avigdor Eskin. Avigdor Eskin is a very hardcore Kahanist and settler Zionist who was also responsible, it is believed, for the cursing Pulsa du Nura, cursed death of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995, that he was part of that cabal that cursed that Prime Minister of Israel at the time to death. So you're talking about a far-right settler Zionist of the most implacable kind, a supporter of Meir Kahane, who was the far-right settler Zionist political figure who was assassinated in Brooklyn, in New York, back in the mid-90s. And these are friends of Aleksandr Dugin. Then you look at his own record of public statements, and several of which are online, where Aleksandr Dugin basically spouts the official Russian government line about Israel and Zionism, effectively making the Zionists and the Russian Federation allies. And the questions and all of these little tidbits go on and on and on and on. Now, the Baha'is are one of the oldest and well-established allies of the Zionists, going back to even before the formation of the State of Israel itself, back in the 1890s, when these Eastern European Zionists started flowing into Palestine at the time. The historical record by Israeli scholars is now proving beyond any shadow of a doubt that the Baha'is acted as the real estate agents of these arriving Zionists from Eastern Europe. And this friendship was solidified through the visits of the two Rothschild brothers, Nathaniel de Rothschild, one in 1891, the other one in, I think, around 1903, 1904, where they were hosted by Abbas Effendi Abdu'l-Baha. And on these examples go all the way to the formation of the State of Israel itself, and the first few years afterwards, where the Baha'is in Haifa were direct beneficiaries of some of these expropriation policies that the Israeli government at the time was pursuing against the absentee Palestinian landlords in the Haifa, Acre, and especially the Mount Carmel region, where these absentee Palestinian landlords were forfeiting their properties, and the Israeli government was turning around and auctioning these properties for very cheap prices, and the Baha'is were stepping in and buying a lot of these properties, and a lot of these shrine complexes that the Baha'is have built on top of Mount Carmel are actually occurring on top of illegally expropriated properties of absentee Palestinian landlords in the immediate post-1948 period. So that relationship with the Israelis is tight with the Zionists. So when you have Russian fascists this type with the Zionists, and then you have the Baha'is this type with the Zionists, and I am enemy to both of them, it is natural and predictable. And furthermore, as that blog, that docs blog by Akira Kalashnikov, who is actually one of the personas of this Polish-American acolyte of Aleksandr Dugin, who lives currently in Poland, this Jafe Arnold character. It is only natural that these two forces would come together, and in particularly because the Baha'is and the Duginists are both authoritarian, and they are after establishing a very dystopian and authoritarian vision of the world. The Baha'is play the game and talk the talk of liberalism and the neoliberal spiel, whereas the Duginists talk the talk of the Eurasianist spiel. So this Atlanticist and Eurasianist divide between the Duginists and the Baha'is is a farce. And I've always argued that ultimately there is no difference between Eurasia and Atlantia. They're both pursuing the same goals, that any competition that occurs between the American empire and the Eurasianists is very surface, that these two are not opponents, that ultimately they're both after the same thing, but just different versions of it, of different versions of the New World Order. And these versions of the New World Order are just basically ornamental. There's nothing substantially different in the visions of the implementation, because both lead to exactly the same form of authoritarian dystopia. One with a lot of lights and fireworks, the other one a little bit more subdued and darker. That's the only difference between the two.
Thank you, Sheikh Wahid Azal. This is very important that this needs to be pointed out, because this also supports what you always been teaching us, is that we need a third force in humanity and on this world. You have on one side the Eurasian crowd, the other side you have the Atlanticist crowd, but we need that third force, because both of them on the surface it looks like they're divided, but behind the scenes it's a totally different game. And we're dealing with these agents of chaos. And the reason why I'm honored to be a part of the Fatimiyya Sufi Tariqa and to be with you and to encourage all of our friends and brothers who are part of this tariqa, or are following the work, is be mindful, especially on social media, because I also had these individuals that Sheikh mentioned message me, try to friend request me. So anyone that stands out like that, immediately block them and report them, because that's what they are. They are the cultists of the kings of Edom. They're Edomites who go against the cosmology of the creator, because they want to annihilate everything. And by being a part of this anti-godly form and being a part of this anti-godly group, and they're doing what they can to sow division, sow chaos and hatred. And Sheikh Wahid Azal is a hero. He's been at forefront of this battle, battling these cultists and Edomites since day one, and why he's seen as a threat to them, and why I am honored to be a part of this these dialogues and to put this education and awareness out there. Because if we just go stagnant, then they get emboldened, like they did recently by making these different accounts and friend requesting Sheikh Wahid Azal's followers and friends and saying all these nonsense in the messages. So anyone that comes like that, immediately report them and block them, and know all of the resources that Sheikh has shared with us. And all of the resources and links will be provided in the description below to support this dialogue and to provide proof. And also this will be basically, this is a culmination of what we have been talking about in part 5 also, which is also on both of our channels. And it's important that you realize what kind of force is it that you're really dealing with. These people are not on anybody's side. They want total annihilation. And it's important you stand behind Sheikh Wahid Azal and take heed to what he's telling you. It's for your own good, and it's for the goodness of humanity, where you're dealing with one side that wants total annihilation, and then you have the other side, which is the side of light. And what do we find in all spiritual teachings? That good and light always overcomes all evil. So these people conspire, they plan, but in the Islamic point of view, we realize that Allah is the best of all planners. So we keep that faith.
What is very interesting is the kind of personas and identities that they attach to. For example, This Dale Husband character, although he spends all of his time on Reddit and on his own blog lambasting against the Baha'is, although his lambasting is so transparent that he's actually acting the capacity of a gatekeeper. The thing is, he also claims to be a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church. Now, I've looked at these people. I looked at these people when I was in the United States, and to tell you the truth, I've never been impressed with the UU at all for a variety of reasons. Because it's first of all, it's very middle class, and it's very white, and its vision of the world and religion is extremely, vanilla and toast, and it's extremely shallow. And it's just, in my opinion, Unitarian Universalism is just an extension of North American or Anglo-European New Ageism.
Yes.
Despite all the lip service that it pays to cultural diversity and acceptance, its vision is very fundamentally American, and very fundamentally white, and very fundamentally liberal, and very fundamentally middle class. Now, I am a eco-Marxist. I believe in the reality of class struggle. I believe in even the reality of the cosmic struggle. Yes, ontologically, we're dealing with a single block without fissure, but in the realm of humanity, this is the world of multiplicity, and so conflict exists. Now I'm not a reactionary, I'm not a conservative, so my value system is not the same value system as you find in the evangelical church or community. Nevertheless, there are certain things that I think are up to debate that with Unitarian Universalists is not even up for debate. Furthermore, the question that I have always had about Unitarian Universalism is how can you claim yourself as a church when your fundamental doctrine is not God-centric? How can you be a religion without some kind of a higher power being at the very center of your cosmology and ontology? Sure, I understand very well that Unitarian Universalism emerges out of the matrix of its own reaction against the excesses of both the evangelical churches and the hierarchical authoritarianism of Catholicism, etc. But how can you claim yourself to be a post-Christian religion where God is not the center of your world? How does that even work? Where you have a church of atheists or agnostics. Now, something as contradictory as that, and this is not a paradox, but it's a contradiction. It's one of those contradictions that is very regularly occurring in a country like the United States, in North America. Europeans look at these sorts of phenomena and laugh, but in North America, this is routine and it's very normative. But there's a dark side to this, because what it basically says is that Unitarian Universalism is basically the wheel of capitalism itself and its American version on the level of religion, right? Now, traditional values, so long as, we have a critical understanding of what traditional values are great. Community is a very good thing. Families staying together are a great thing. Keeping people together is a good thing. But the kind of aim, a kind of a postmodern ethics and morality that Unitarian Universalism appears to me to be espousing is actually working against that. And when all of this is unpacked, it appears to me from some of the discussions that we've had in the past that an organization and a church like the Unitarian Universalist is actually a handmaiden to the process of capitalism. So exactly. It might pretend to be liberal, it might pretend to be progressive, but ultimately it is serving the system.
Exactly. That's very important, Sheikh, that you point that out, because I notice in a lot of these so-called diverse groups here in America where they're preaching liberal ideals or diversity, some of those people are perpetuating those agendas of racism and the systematic gentrification that I've seen in a lot of these cities here in America. I'm here in the Philadelphia area, and the gentrification of kicking out all of the people of color from these neighborhoods. And who were the people that were moving in? It was these same people with these same groups, with the liberal-minded people who said we love everyone, but then they're participating in living in these neighborhoods and gentrifying these areas. And also,
see how this works. And at the same time, Dale Husband and other UU people are anti-Marxists. So one of their biggest shticks against me is why I'm espousing Marxian political economy. First of all, a lot of these people don't have any kind of a depth of understanding of what Marxism is. They have a very almost a comic understanding of Marxism from the Cold War era of the United States. They've never read any of these texts. They don't understand that Marx was not an atheist, that his statement, religion is the opium of the masses, has nothing to do with shunning religion at all. It actually, once you read the whole quote, you realize he's actually saying the opposite of that. They don't know any of this stuff. They have no idea that in the third world, in Latin America, that you had Marxist priests, that religion took an actual Marxian spin during the 1960s and 1970s. That one of the most important contemporary theologies that emerged over the last 50 years came out of a fusion of traditional Catholic Christian theology and Marxism, liberation theology. They don't know any of this stuff. But then, they talk about being progressive and inclusive, but they have a problem with Marxists or people espousing a Marxian political economy. And just like you said, they move into neighborhoods, right? They push out the poorer sectors of those societies out, gentrify these neighborhoods, and they make a buck while pretending to be open and inclusive and liberal and, inclusive of LGBTQ people, but we hate poor people. We don't want poor. We don't want to look at poor people. We want to all hold hands and sing kumbaya. But to hell with the Marxists and to hell with people who are trying to keep a community together, a real community.
That's absolutely right. See, if I was somebody like that and I'm preaching all of this diversity and I love everyone, I would not participate, knowing if I know in this neighborhood, me participating or living in this neighborhood is supporting the agenda of people of color being kicked out. On top of a lot of these groups that are basically saying we welcome everyone, but you look at all of these people, where do they really live? I mean, they're all preaching about America being a melting pot, but it's a set of ethnic enclaves and communities.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of like hiding in their own communities, especially you have a
Yeah,
lot of these people
all in
that
the community.
they work in
Yeah.
their own places where you have people of color, and you see that there is that systematic racism where they don't allow them to get ahead while they're like kind of doing their own thing. So the ones that are preaching this equality stuff and all this other stuff, they're the ones you got to watch out for, because it's like what Malcolm X said, rest in peace. You have to realize who you're dealing with especially with the liberal community and the conservative community. So he did mention some truths in his statements, that you have these people under the agenda of diversification, moving into minority neighborhoods, et cetera, and then you don't know that they are supporting that agenda of white supremacy. And
Yes.
but by
Yes, they
kicking
are.
these people out and making sure that people are not being able to progress in organizations or schools or occupations, and they're keeping people tied up in a certain event. Like in Philadelphia, the crime has been out of control. And you know why they're doing that is it's all perpetuated to get the people of color to get out of there. So
Yes.
eventually the people, the so-called liberals will come in, buy everything up on pennies on the dollar, and then rent it out for thousands of dollars or sell it for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's all part of that plan. I mean, you go to North Philly, Sheikh. North Philly, you have one section of the city, and those people are African American. They're working, they're homeowners, they're paying taxes, but nobody from the city will ever come and clean up anything on their street or fix up their neighborhoods. So the systematic racism, especially in liberal controlled cities like where I'm at, it's right in front of you, but people are blind. They would say, oh, you're making things up or you're doing this. But I tell them this: you're living in your privileged life. By privilege, I mean you live in a nicer neighborhood and you basically have better opportunities in life. I mean, as a Pakistani, even though I have a clean record and a college degree, they only want me to drive Uber, work at a 7-Eleven, or work at a cell phone store, or work at a place that's owned by a foreigner who's the only one that's going to hire me. So that's where they want to keep us at. And it's right here. So if I go around and say, okay, this, and this, they're like, oh, no, you're making things up. So they have this gaslighting and this narcissism also to make you go away, which is what they're doing to you, to make you go away. But that's where they're mistaken, because you and I will hit them hard. And that's what we're doing right now by sharing the truth and telling the people to know the truth.
Exactly. You just put your finger on something very important. Every time these nemesis that they cultivate against me, happen to be white men. right? They can't
Right.
seem to find another man of color, right, to be a consistent nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
They have to find a man, a white man. So, first they prop up Dale Husband against me, a man who was on record for being an Islamophobe,
Yeah.
despite all of his, preaching of being a inclusive LGBTQ Unitarian Universal. The man is a complete raving racist Islamophobe.
Yeah.
And now with this Polish fellow, right, who's pretending to be a Bayani, Catholic, Noahide, all this kind of contradictory nonsense fitting the Duginist persona. So, right there, it tells you that we are dealing with a race war here. This is not, has nothing to do with what I'm saying, what I'm claiming, what I'm doing. Well, it has a lot to do with what I'm doing, but ultimately this is a race war. And that the white liberal, gay or straight, is as much a white supremacist as the swastika carrying neo-Nazi. So, and this is the problem. I mean, I have tried to mitigate this in every conceivable way, whether I was in Europe or when I was living in North America and now back here in Australia. But the egregore, the collective egregore of the white world doesn't want to let go of this demon. It has it. This demon has them. So if a uppity brown or black man, stands in their face or refuses to go down, right? They will go out of their way to take this black or brown brother down, whether it's me, whether it's you, whether it's somebody else. Because ultimately what animates all of this is the racism, is the white supremacy. Mm-hmm. They don't want to give us our due. I mean, Malcolm X saw this in the 60s. Martin Luther King saw this in the 60s. Unfortunately, as we moved into the 70s and the 80s, a lot of the black leadership in the United States began to, get absorbed into the establishment. So many of the talking points that a lot of the black and brown leaders of the 1960s were espousing, particularly the Black Panthers, has now all fallen by the wayside. And, the black and brown movement of the 1960s that really was championing rights and equality for real has been sidelined. So now we find ourselves in the second decade of the 21st century, where not only have we not moved forward to where folks were back in the late 1960s, but as we saw with the election of Donald Trump and its fallout, we have actually moved backward, where, unfortunately, you also have a lot of black and brown people because of this, very occult force that this system of neoliberal capitalism instills in self-hatred, for black and brown people to hate themselves, the kind of stuff that Malcolm X was putting his finger on all throughout the 1950s and 1960s, they are falling into the camp of these fascists, where you find, Iranians, Pakistanis, Africans, African Americans, Latinos, etc., all voting as blocks for a fascist like Donald Trump. Now, I'm not endorsing Biden or the Democratic Party. I think they're just as bad. I didn't like Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is a war criminal. This woman was responsible for the destruction of Libya, and that Jamhuriya Republic. And it was responsible also for the murder of Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of a state who didn't commit any crime, as it turns out later on, that nothing actually happened during that era, whose country was illegally bombarded by a deceptively imposed NATO a Security Council resolution that the Russians also endorsed. They endorsed the no-fly zone over Libya. So, despite all the lip service, you look at what people are doing, not what they're saying, right? And this is where a lot of people need to move to. Stop listening to what people are saying, but look at what people are doing, right? The Russians, the Americans, et cetera, the Iranians, the Chinese, they say a lot of stuff, right? Words are cheap. Let deeds, not words, be your adorning, as my ancestor Boratalain once said. Let deeds, not words, be your adorning. Let's see what you're doing, where you stand, who you support for real, not what you're saying. And that's what really matters. So, we have to be conscious. Now, I'm not saying all white people are racist, because they're not. I have a lot of white comrades. I love these people to death. I have loved a white woman. Maybe I will love another white woman in the not too distant future. Who knows? It's in the hands of God. But my child is half white. But the fact of the matter is that the white male, predominantly, not all white males, but predominantly the white male of a certain temperament has a problem And as much as they psychopathologize people from our part of the world, I am beginning to see a genuine psychopathological problem with the kind of acculturation and the social engineering that is happening in the Western world of the white male and his mentality, where the white male is basically brainwashed over a lifetime to become a racist. And it is only very few, but there are a substantial number who are immune to this collective brainwashing over a lifetime and who can look at their fellow brothers, Black and brown brothers, as brothers rather than as rivals or enemies and whatnot. Because these people need to realize the way that this planet is moving right now, the kind of crises that people like me are seeing over the horizon. If we don't get over these things, we are doomed as a species, all of us, and it won't make any difference whether you're black or brown or white or yellow or pink or whatever, right? But capital, this system of neoliberal capitalism, in the manner in which it behaves, thrives on the divisions and the conflicts, right? And unfortunately, because of these divisions and conflicts, I have basically pulled out all my non-existent hair trying to figure out strategies about how to stop this juggernaut. And I've come to the conclusion that one has to play a extremely subtle game with this beast, where you give this beast, it's like one step forward, two steps back, and at certain times conflict with this system is inevitable, and with the representative of the system is inevitable. And oftentimes you have to call things out as they are. You can't sugarcoat it. You can't make it fluffy. You have to call it out as it is. Just like the prayer of the prophet, peace be upon him, says, Allahumma oh God, show us the realities as they truly are. Well, certain realities as they truly are can become very ugly. So we have a responsibility, and we have to assess the situation, and we have to call things out as they really are. So going back to the issue at hand, and these two trolls, Dale Husband and his Polish Catholic fascist lunatic friend, the bottom line, as I see it, is that this is their problem with me, and especially with Dale Husband, is that I called out the beast very early on. I pointed out to this guy, for example, that he's a racist. I pointed out to him that his vision of the Islamic world and Muslims and people of color is a extremely stereotyped one, despite his pretensions to being inclusive and universalist and Unitarian and all that kind of nonsense. And that's where he was triggered. So all the people that have been coming to his aid, other than these fools in Iran who have cultivated him as well, this Dale Husband, this is fundamentally a racial conflict from his point of view, right? And the fact that he's an anti-Marxist, right, and that he's on record blaming me for my own Marxism is additional proof of the fact that we are dealing with an extremely reactionary individual. So naturally, he's going to be attracting other reactionary people. So despite his pretensions of being liberal and progressive, the closest that he can attract to himself in order to be in solidarity with him in a situation is another reactionary, this time a Polish one, right, who is on the same page as Aleksandr Dugin and the Eurasianists. So that's what we're dealing with. So people have to be very vigilant, to the kind of occult, causality that is going on here as well. And like I said, look at what people are doing and not necessarily what they're saying, right? Because if what they're saying does not accord with what they're doing, then there is a form of black sorcery happening. And so we need to be adept at that process in order to arrest it when it rears its head. I don't have a problem with people attacking my person. I am not that attached to my personality anymore. Once upon a time, maybe when I was younger, I used to be. They can attack me. But what I'm worried about, I have a daughter to look out for until I leave this rock. I have a child to protect, to rear, to grow, to ensure that this child grows up healthy, happy, and together, given the experience that she had in witnessing the passing of her own mother in front of her. And I do not wish these sorts of conflicts to kind of seep into my personal life, either to affect me or to, in the long term, affect this poor child who hasn't done anything, right? They want to attack me as much as you want. I've developed a tough skin these days. And also the people around me, some of the people like yourself, you people are salts of the earth. You haven't done anything. Why should you be subjected to this drama endlessly, when you haven't done anything? And furthermore, I haven't done anything to deserve this sort of insanity by these people who are genuinely and legitimately mentally ill, broken lives, broken souls, broken existences. They are, as the Quran says, summun bukum ummun, blind, deaf, dumb, deaf, and mute. In every conceivable way, their souls are black, dark. And as much as you try to, not get into the way and not try to, violate people's boundaries, these people have no compunction whatsoever in violating the boundaries of other people. And this mentality is the mentality of imperialism. And this is why, people, social scientists and Marxists are consistently equating, white supremacy and capitalism, white supremacy and imperialism. Because these things are the same thing. It is the same thing. It is not, it's just a different way of looking at the same reality. And instead of the white man growing up, coming out of this stupor of his, of believing that he is the Ubermensch, after all the blood, death, and destruction that he unleashed during the 20th century, that recoiled on himself, he's back to where he was before, and he's repeating the same patterns of mistakes that he has been over the last 500 years. So the question is, what is it going to take for him to stop it? We don't want to fight the man, right? We just want the man to grow up and to be our brother. We don't want the man to continue in the way he is, right? But he doesn't want to wake up. So what are we supposed to do? Especially when we have families and communities to protect from the assaults and onslaught of this beast. What are we supposed to do?
Yes, Sheikh, definitely. And I thank you for sharing these views. And I agree with you completely that people have to realize that we're not being racist against anybody. We're pointing out hard fact truths that need to be realized on top of the system that we're dealing with, which a person of color, if you walk a day in their shoes, you will understand what we're talking about. And we have white friends, white mates, and people that are behind us on this path that we're walking. And we have to follow Sheikh Wahid Azal, what he has completely pointed out about the aspects of social justice and what we're dealing with in terms of occult and spiritual warfare, and why I have always honored his advice about upping up your spiritual practices. Because these people, every person that I've seen that has tried to dig a hole for others, they have fallen into their own holes. And I've seen it time and time again. The most important thing we could do is continue to keep up our education, our awareness under the rights, national, international rights of free speech, free expression, and to keep our spiritual practices consistent, and to know who we are and what we stand for, and to even realize that even if you stay stagnant and don't do anything, you're still going to be targeted by a racist system, just like how we have our Black and brown brothers and sisters in these metropolis cities across America. They're stagnant, not probably doing anything about it, and they're getting gentrified left and right. So it's either you take action or you let the system displace you, just like how it's been displacing many people for many, many years. It's about education and awareness, and it's about coming together. It's about coming together. It's about creating a great future for our children and their children, like the responsibility our Sheikh has with his daughter. And it's better that we give them a better world, not this chaos that we're dealing with, this madness and this hatred that we're dealing with. Our children deserve better. His daughter deserves better. And shame on those who attack Sheikh Wahid Azal and do all of this defamation and this slander and all of this craziness that these agents of chaos and cultists are doing. These people are doomed to a fiery existence when the time comes for them. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, that they plan, but I am also the best of all planners. So what we do is we keep up our spiritual practices. We keep up what we're doing, and without them having any effect on our mental, emotional, or spiritual state. So like what we're doing tonight, I'm still doing the good work with Sheikh Wahid Azal. We're putting out education and awareness. We're keeping our spiritual practices consistent. We're putting our faith in the higher power, in God. And we realize that in the equation of humanity and this equation of order and chaos, he is the ultimate balancer. When Prophet Joseph, peace be upon him, his brothers threw him down the well. And what happened at the end? He was standing in the food line, giving people food. and he saw his brothers that had betrayed him right there in that same food line, and he forgave them. So it's about forgiveness, about mercy, about being consistent with our practices, putting our faith in God, and keep doing what you're doing, no matter what. You don't care about who's in front of you or who's behind you. You just keep treading on this path, just like all the great prophets and messengers and the great men and women of God who have walked this earth without fearing any kind of repercussion or danger. Because when you, just like the Fatimiyya Sufi order, it places a heavy emphasis on the Nur Fatimiyya. We trust the light. So when we're doing the work of the light and the creator, don't worry. You just keep doing what you're doing, and the light will protect us from all evil because we're doing the work of the divine creator. So these people out there, their days are numbered. And these cultists of the kings of Edom and all of these different people who are on the side of darkness, they shall reap what they sow. And I will see that within my lifetime as we see this age of chaos that we're in the 2020s. And each year we see there's something in the air that has changed. I mean, I can feel it. Here in Philadelphia, I went to London recently. I felt something was not right compared to 2019 and compared to now. That's because people are detached from each other in terms of relationships, interactions, trusting God, trusting each other. So there is that separation of the wheat and the chaff that will occur. It's inevitable because people have been led astray by the system that's telling everyone that we're equal, but we see systematic oppression and racism still occurring on a massive scale in this world. And we have to be the ones to call it out. We can't just sit quietly and not do anything about it, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in the heart of Musa, Moses, peace be upon him, in Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. All of the great beings of God who had walked this earth, it was put into their heart. And that's why they were placed, with Jesus being placed in the Roman environment, Moses being placed in the environment of the pharaohs, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, being placed in the environment of the those that were worshiping the idols. So now, right now, we're placed in a system that's doing what it's doing, and we have to, as followers of God and true followers of God, keep up the great work that we're doing and support Sheikh Wahid Azal. Listen to all of his podcasts. This part 8, which is a continuation of part 5, will also be added on both of our channels. Please listen to part 5 and part 8 so you have a better understanding of these Duginists and these agents of chaos and these occultists that we're dealing with, and to let them know that no matter what you do, good is always destined to win. It is written, it is, and it shall be. We keep smiling, we keep doing what we're doing, because you know where you're going to end up. We know where we're ending up.
Well, let me end on this note. I want to, especially this gentleman who claims to be a Christian as well as a Noahide, and now he's trying to take on the persona of being a Bayani, which he isn't. I'm going to invoke verse 61 of the 3rd surah of the Quran. This is the famous verse of Mubahala, the mutual execration. This is when the delegation of Christians from Najran came to Medina to dispute with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about his claims. This famous verse in the Quran, verse 3/61, the Prophet says, "Ta'alu nat'u abna'ana wa abna'ikum wa nisa'ina wa nisa'ikum wa anfusina wa anfusikum thumma nabtahil fanaj'al la'natullah 'alal kadhibin." Come, let us call our sons and your sons, our women and your women, ourselves and yourselves. Then let us pray earnestly and call down God's curse upon the liars.
Yes, definitely, Sheikh. And I would also like to add one more verse before we end this, with Surah 49, verse 10, where it says, "The believers are but one brotherhood. So make peace between your brothers, so Allah can have mercy on you." And the believers and the brotherhood, it's all of us. No matter what race or religion, as long as you're on the side of righteousness, you are part of that brotherhood of believers. So with that, we say good night, Nur alaikum, to our beloved Sheikh Wahid Azal, and until next time, until we do part 9, inshallah.
Inshallah.